Hi, welcome to the Aruba OS 8.3 how-to video series. This is the fourth video in a 15-part video series that covers the deployment and configuration of an Aruba OS 8.3 system. This video specifically is going to cover the configuration of the Mobility Master redundancy within the same data center. So with looking at the original architectural diagram, this section here between MM1 and MM2 is what we're going to be configuring for this video. Now, we call this layer 2 master redundancy because we're using a VRRP IP address between the two devices, and they also are configured with master redundancy to do things like database replication and license replication from one to the other, so that if one were to fail, the other one can take over without losing any data. Now, there's two parts to establishing the layer 2 mobility master redundancy. The first is obviously creating the VRRP IP address that's going to be used. And then secondly, to establish the master redundancy config between the two devices. So first things first, we're going to go to the primary MM. We're going to open this up and go to Mobility Master and click on the actual Mobility Master itself, which is 8.3 MM1. We'll go to Services and Redundancy, and underneath here there is a virtual router table. You'll click the little blue plus sign. We'll give this router ID, let's just say 50. We're going to use IPv4. We'll do this as the VRRP authentication protocol or password. We'll do 192.168.200.50 as the IP address, and because this is a primary, we'll give them the bigger number for priority. I'm not going to do anything with preemption, and I'm not going to do anything with tracking just because it falls outside of trying to make this kind of a simple, easy to follow process. So we're going to go ahead and submit, and then we're going to go ahead and apply these changes to this first guy. Now, what I should see when I command line in, if I do a show VRRP, you can see that this IP address is up. If I were to, let's say, ping it from a device, I could ping .50, and I can see that it responds. So I know at least the VRRP IP is up on the primary master. Now, secondly, what I'll do is I'll come back to the 8.3 MM2 and do the exact same thing. I'm going to go to Services, Redundancy, Virtual Router Table, click the little blue plus sign. It's important to note that the router ID and the authentication password match. If they don't, then neither one of them will recognize the other, and they'll both go up as active, and that can create a problem on the network. The IP address is 192.168.200.50. We'll make this priority a little lower. Let's just say 150. I want to go ahead and move him as up in VLAN 200. Everything else looks good. I'll hit submit and go ahead and deploy the change. And what I should see, if I come to the command line, I should see show VRRP. I should see that he is in the backup state. And this guy is up. So one quick test that I can do is I can go back to the primary and edit this guy to make him down and hit submit and deploy changes. And what I should see is the secondary go active. So it should be the master, which I do. So I know that the VRRP exchange is working correctly. I'm going to go ahead and make this guy back up, or mark that VRRP state as up, deploy change. And because I'm not doing preemption, it stays wherever it was. So I'm going to go ahead and move it down on the backup and then just put it back up. So we'll hit submit, deploy, and then we'll see that it moves. It'll actually be in a disabled state or in a init state. This guy should go back to being the master, and he does. I'm going to come back over here real quick. Mark him back up. That's a very long way to just make sure that I know what I'm doing when I demonstrate this stuff, to make sure that it's working, so that if I run into any problems later, I know that I don't have to troubleshoot this. Now, to establish the second component of the master redundancy config, we need to actually establish the master redundancy between the two mobility masters. So I'm going to go back to the primary MM, and I'm going to go from the virtual router table to the master redundancy side. And I'm going to enter the master VRRP ID, which is 50, and we know that from the VRRP IP that we established here, which shows the VRRP ID of 50 for both controllers. And so we go back here, the peer IP address for MM1 is the IP address of MM2, which is .52. We also need to establish an IPsec key between these two devices to secure the communication between the two MMs. So I'm going to go ahead and apply this config here. I'm going to go to the second MM and do the exact same thing, except I will use the IP of the MM1 as the peer, which is .51. I'll use the same passphrase to build the IPsec tunnel, and then hit submit and apply those changes. So now we have this all done. We have the master redundancy config enabled. Now we just need to enable the synchronization. To do that, we need to make sure we're doing this on the master itself. So we'll come back to the mobility master level. We'll enable database synchronization and set it to 60 minutes and hit submit. And then we'll apply the pending changes and deploy. Now you can see, if you noticed over here, that it eventually showed up into the switch tree, so we know that master redundancy is working. But we're going to go ahead and take a couple extra steps to verify that everything's working the way we expect it should. So first things first, there's some commands that you can run from the primary. So to know who is in charge, you can do a show VRP, and it shows you whether they're in the master state or not. And then so what I'll do is I will just run a database synchronize. And what this does is this forces a complete synchronization between the two MMs. So it says it's been initiated. Please check the status using the show database synchronize. Now what we're looking for here is a number of different things. First, we're seeing the last time that it's synced, which is April 23rd, 5:23. We can see that there's been one attempt and no failure. And we can see that this is set to run every 60 minutes. You can make this as low as 15 minutes. I think you can make it as high as 24 hours. But right now I've got it just set for 60 minutes. I can also run a show switches at the command line, and you can see that I see my primary at 51 and my secondary at 52. You can see who is the master, who is the standby, and that the configuration state for both is successful. You can also see that the configuration ID is 3 for both. This is a pretty quick and dirty way to check and make sure that all of your controllers are running the same configuration. And so as we add controllers to this list, you'll see this list grow, and we can come to the command line to check the config ID and see how many times we've pushed a unique or a different configuration. So everything's done, everything's back up and running. I've got my two my two L2 connected mobility masters. One is MM1, one is MM2, and they're both up and running. So any changes that I make underneath mobility master will get replicated to the other one as well. So that concludes setting up L2 master redundancy between two MMs. If you have any questions, certainly reach out to community.arubanetworks.com or reach out to your local Aruba SE or partner. Thank you.